All right, welcome back from lunch, everyone,
Hello, hello.
or dinner. Had some interesting troubleshooting before lunch here. So let me go ahead and share my screen real quick here. Oh, out of curiosity, was there anyone else that didn't see membership synchronized, or rather the licensing being assigned to the user? Because we had one student here that they just refused for two of the users, but not for other users. And they were all added to the same group.
My two original ones didn't get it. So I manually checked the two licenses under the users, even though they were referenced in the security group. So, and it shows that they have them now. I don't know if that's incorrect way of doing it, but it worked, it looks like.
Yeah, so I forgot to mention it, but one of you that mentioned that there are graph calls for this. Albert, it was that mentioned this. So on my screen, I have the regular Graph Explorer open, and there is a feature for reprocessing license assignment. That was the feature that I mentioned was used to be in the Intune portal. You can just click a button that says reprocess. I was curious if you would run that, if it would make a difference, but if it already shows up under those users, there is no point. Or did it still not show up?
I unfortunately just deleted the ones who had no license.
Okay. Well,
What is weird, Johan, is I deleted my user that had the same issue and then restored it. And then they came back and it synced back into and picked up those licenses. So I'm not really sure what's going on.
My guess is that there was some hiccup on the server side, because there is you obviously didn't do anything incorrectly. If you restore a device and it works.
Yeah,
But
after restoring, they came back assigned with license and stuff like that. So it's good on my end now.
Yeah. So anyhow, I share this link in the chat if anyone is interested. But that was an odd issue, I have to say. There was a comment from Chris earlier. Didn't see the deployment service. It can take a little while, and you must grant permissions to the account. Let me see what that URL was. I think it was subscriber SKUs. Yeah, it was subscriber SKUs. If you done a get with that URL and you do a search in the bottom part of the screen, it should show that deployment service, assuming that configuration was done in the tenant. Still not showing for you, Chris?
No,
No, I'm good now. I'm good now.
Awesome. So it just took time.
Yep.
Story of Intune. Yeah, but I think to some extent, Intune is a shared service. You will hear us referring to that many times. You end up in a queue somewhere. And depending on where that queue is, it will take X minutes to process that item. It's pretty much your machines and 60 million other machines that are worked. And Kent mentioned that they're collecting so much data around this. There are policies and syncs happening all the time, all around the 440 some microservices that makes up Intune in every single Azure region. I mean, if you guys think of it, I usually say this, but if you throw 60 million devices into a config manager server, it's going to be a bit sluggish too, if all working. But yeah, all right. Good find, everyone. Thank you for the support and troubleshooting, teamwork. I like that. Any other questions before we move on?
I was at least going to say, at risk of stating the obvious here too, Johan, just to add on to what you said, with licensing here, it feels like we're waiting a long time, but a lot of this is really going to be onboarding type stuff in the organization, right? So a lot of this is just going to automatically happen in the background, where sometimes we don't necessarily concern ourselves with the fact of whether it takes 10 minutes or 6 hours to do some of these things. So that's something to keep in mind, I think, as well. Of course, there are times where we do want these things to happen very quickly. But often this particular task, it's okay if it takes a while.
Yeah, of course, it's quite rare that you set up the tenant and create the first users like at the same time, perhaps. But yeah, good point. All right. So you heard Kent's arguments during the keynote here. We mentioned it briefly this morning as well, but what are your thoughts on hybrid versus cloud native, meaning having still Active Directory around, if not for devices or for users, or going cloud native with everything?
Currently, I work for a law firm, and we are hybrid. So we do have Active Directory services, and we also have Azure services. My biggest thing when moving in, because when I first started working here, I was kind of new to the Azure situation. I was wondering, like, what are the biggest benefits of becoming like completely, cloud native? And I think that's where, most companies are going toward, but my company specifically is kind of just leveraging the benefits of both, Active Directory services and also Azure services. So I think they have its place depending on the specific environment that you're trying to run, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're totally correct. The answer is it depends. There is still a lot of services, applications, printers that have dependencies on local Active Directory. And in general, the benefits of not having both is that you only have one identity to manage if you only have one. Basically, you're maintaining two different identity providers and you're trying to sync them in between, and that adds a complexity layer compared to having only one. Simple more setup. Luckily, this is something that's been around for quite some time, and Entra Connect these days that we use for sync or cloud sync or whatever you're using, they're fairly robust sync engines, so they work well. In terms of co-management, meaning having config manager into around at the same time, it is often for organizations who have the need to do something that is only available in config manager. For example, they want to be able to do imaging, maybe not as their way of doing things anymore, but to be able to recover devices if they get a breach, or just to deploy a couple of test machines because we're going to test upgrades or whatever that need might be. I recommend everyone to have at least something available that will allow you to image a machine if needed. It doesn't have to be as complex in a config manager environment, but if you already have it set up and it's working, why not use it? You have a license for it. We used to see organizations like education, like college, K-12 and whatnot. Andrew has been heavily involved with that for years and years. They often have the need to deploy really large applications and somewhat quickly. Intune does none of that. The largest app you can have in Intune is 30 gigs. And even then, it's going to take a while to get down to the devices. You typically have to implement cache servers locally to be able to deal with large apps in Intune. And even the user interface is so slow when uploading, so you typically have to use PowerShell script just to get the stuff up there. So there are still benefits of having them both together. But again, there are two management stacks that you need to manage. There are two identity providers you need to manage. And organizations who only have one of them, of course, has a slightly simpler setup. And simple goes a long way too. All right, awesome. Now when you have an Intune tenant up and running, you have a couple of users that finally got their license to work in the tenant to enroll devices. We're going to ahead and deploy a couple. So I'm going to drop a lab in the guide. It's a really short lab. It's on premises, so it doesn't require any syncs or something happen in an Azure region somewhere. It will happen on your device, and it will be one of the fastest deployment you will ever do. Obviously, because we are cheating a little bit, but it's going to be a quick deployment. So let me put that in the chat for you. Oh, there are two parts to this lab. The first one is just getting to know Hyper-V, the Hyper-V setup we have in the lab a little bit. And the other part is quickly deploy a few clients using a healthy dose of PowerShell. There we are. Lab time, deploy clients. We'll be here if you guys have any questions. Awesome. Looks like most of you are done with that one, if not everyone. Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Now, obviously, the point here, I'll go ahead and share my screen. You won't be able to do everything in Intune with virtual machines, but you'll be able to do a lot of stuff in Intune with virtual machines. And as well as we recommend to have an Intune tenant available for pre-production, for lab, for testing, just having access to some sort of virtual platform where you can quickly spin up VMs for testing, that is absolutely golden. I probably deploy 40, 50 VMs a day at times that we use for different purposes and testing and whatnot. So it's really, really useful. Now, obviously, when it comes to things like virus and BIOS, stuff like that, yeah, you would need to have physical devices. There are also some TPM attestation that require physical devices, but like, think of 100 Intune things that you can do. 95 of them you will be able to do on a virtual machine. And if you don't like it, you destroy it and you build a new one. Rinse, repeat. But once you have devices, at least a couple, that's when we can start to have them enrolled. And once they get enrolled, we can manage them. So when working with devices on the platforms, there are a couple of terms that you simply need to know. And that is the Entra join versus Entra registration versus hybrid join. Now, you guys can think of, first of all, what type of devices do you use for an Entra join? Do you have any takers on that one? Is it a personal device or is it a company device for an Entra join?
That should be company devices, correct?
That will be company devices. Per definition, corporately owned device, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, company device. Work PC, long storage. Now, Entra join, when it's read like I selected it here, it means no local Active Directory. So no on-premise Active Directory required for that scenario. And basically, this is the cloud native option as Microsoft describes it. All right, what about Entra registration? What type of device is that? Company or personal?
They're often personal.
That will be personal, absolutely. A lot of organizations, they're actually blocking personal devices for, I think, good reasons. I know a couple that don't, but in general, organizations, they don't want to have to deal with that stuff. So they block that. They basically have restrictions preventing them from being registered. But the reason some organizations are doing this, it's because they want to leverage things like conditional access or single sign-on. So basically, they have some idea of being able to check in on the device before granting access to resources, online resources that you use. So that is it. Yeah, go ahead.
Technically, that means it is possible to have a personal device to be Entra joined. Yeah, it's just there is a trade-off, maybe privacy or other things. Is that right?
No, the wording is different. If you have a personal device, that goes with the Entra registration.
Registration.
Yeah, when it's Entra join, which I'm doing in blue color now, that will be the company device. That's a like domain joined by the cloud.
Got it.
So
is it the same thing that the MAM or bring your own device?
you mean for like my mobile devices for phones, etc.?
Yeah.
A little bit different, but Johan and Sandy will go through that in detail with you on Wednesday. I try to stay away from mobile devices as much as I can.
Yeah,
I'm not good at it. They are, so it's better for them to answer that. They have that's part of that presentation already, but so yeah. Now, hybrid join is obviously where we do both. Hybrid join means that we join the device to Active Directory first, and we have a sync process going, Entra Connect sync running, and the device gets registered into Entra, so it becomes visible there as well. That is the hybrid scenario. One of the best resources I found, it's a little bit old, it's like 5 years old, but this link here from Noel explains it real well in like good English on how these different scenarios work and what the benefits are and drawbacks, etc. I think this one is way better than the Microsoft documentation on the same topic. So I'll put that one in the chat for you if you give me a second to work around a copy and paste thing. There we go. Now, going back to earlier, we mentioned that very, very common enrollment methods is either to leverage Windows Autopilot for enrollment, or it's if you are in a hybrid environment, you would allow the connector to go ahead and basically take care of that part for you. So you have devices on premises and you allow it to sync. But in general, there are two types of enrollment. We have user-based enrollment, where either a user open up Access Worker School, or they open up the company portal app if they have that installed available, or they can do an enrollment only for management or NDM enrollment only. In general, with the rare exceptions of autopilot, we prefer to have a more admin-based enrollment. It can be, as I said, having a policy, making sure devices get properly joined and enrolled that way. It could be having config manager do it for you, because it can. Andrew, any thoughts on device enrollment managers? If you're still on the call.
Yes, I am. Yep, I'm going to pull up that documentation real quick. So we talked a little bit earlier about shared devices. And if you do have a bunch of devices that you need to enroll above and beyond that 15, I'm going to drop a link in the chat in a second here, Johan, if you don't mind pulling it up.
I should be able to do that.
We have this concept called device enrollment managers, which are basically a special role that you can assign to a user account in Entra. And these device enrollment manager accounts can enroll up to 1,000 devices. So this is a common method to do that type of bulk enrollment. You can have up to 150 device enrollment manager accounts. So you can actually enroll technically 150,000 devices this way, though that might be a little bit tedious. This is another good option for that type of bulk enrollment for especially for shared devices. Excuse me.
Yeah. In addition to that, we also have bulk enrollment. We mentioned that earlier. With that type, it's basically you as an admin, you create a bulk enrollment package, and then you distribute that to the user somehow. We often use this, we integrate with deployment to stage these bulk enrollment packages, so that the device, when you deploy, just becomes either joined into Entra only, because that's a property you can set on the bulk enrollment package, or more commonly, it's joined and with auto enrollment also enrolled into Intune. So long story short, we call that autopilot plan B. We'll come back to that a little bit later, but long story short, you can use either the configuration designer tool, part of the ADK, you can download it from the store, or you can use a PowerShell module to create a provisioning package. That package is tiny. It's like a couple of kilobytes in size, will fit on a floppy. You remember floppies. But then when you have your sequences or whatever deployment solution you use, you just stage that package during deployment. PowerShell script, stage it, done. And then when the machine comes back, at that point, it's enrolled. Practically a shared device at that point, because we don't know any user yet. Autopilot, we would know user, but here we don't know user.
How long does it take?
10 minutes, give or take, for the entire thing.
Okay.
So it's way faster than any type of other enrollment option, because we don't go through all the processing that we would for example, an autopilot enrollment. But you can make it even easier than that. I was working with a company, we were helping them convert applications from a config manager environment. And they needed to deploy test devices real quick so we can test the apps. And we were actually using Windows 365 cloud PCs for that testing. And inside of those Windows 365 PCs, we ran VMs, because the shinier Windows 365 VMs, they support nesting. So we have VMs in VMs, and we needed to deploy them real quick, and we didn't have a deployment solution available. Not in this environment, they simply didn't have it. So that way you can do something even more simple. You can take an unattended file together with a provision package and just smack it into the right folders and generate a new ISO. So long story short, with a little bit of PowerShell, you can do pretty much what you did with VMs, but you use it to generate a bootable ISO. It's not very long, 100 lines. But what it does, it creates an ISO that will deploy Windows fully automatically with the bulk enrollment package to enroll the device. So you create a VM, you configure to use the ISO, and you start it. And you take a coffee break, and when you come back, it's enrolled. You can have done the same thing with the stuff that you were doing here in the lab. You probably noticed that that script, when it ran, it actually mounted that disk image that you created, that virtual hard drive, and injected stuff. You can inject more stuff. So all of this is just different techniques to very quickly get machines available for enrollment, or so they basically become Intune managed at that point. So these are all different options available to you. And even if an organization today go all in, say, hybrid, that's what they want to do, or if they go all in autopilot, that's what they want to do. I do recommend to keep a plan B in your environment well tested, so you know that it works. Because, for example, autopilot, as you will learn when we come to that module, there are so many different dependencies on that platform, and it only takes one of them from being down, and suddenly you have no autopilot anymore. So over the years, autopilot, unfortunately, got a little bit of a bad reputation for being like broken, but it's usually not the autopilot's fault. The autopilot services themselves are often fully functional. It's often one of the many dependencies that decided to have a bad day. Like you're trying to get a cert from a HP and their server was not responding at the moment for whatever reason, and whatever that might be. So anyhow, these are the options that are available, and even in lab environments, I think it's okay. Or in lab, I think it's okay to learn about doing self-enrollment. But for larger scale enterprise things, I prefer the admin route if possible. Now, there is one thing I particularly like around self-enrollment. And that is when you try to figure things out, where you try to learn, okay, what's really going on here? Because then you can do the enrollment, you check scripts, you can check event logs, you can check the system, you can look for certificates, you can look for scheduled tasks being created. So you can try to figure out, okay, what is actually Windows doing here when I enroll the device? So as a learning tool, I think it's brilliant. Would I sit down and enroll 2,000 users manually using the Access Work or School portal? No, I don't think you can pay me that well. But anywho, what I wanted to show you here, if I go to a device, let's see, I have a couple that I deployed earlier. This one would be just fine.
Johan, could we
Yes.
encounter some problems? Could we do enrollment into Defender in the same task sequence, for example?
If you can update Defender?
No, start the enrollment to Global Defender console. Because the
Yes.
rules, even if you don't enable co-management at the moment, MDE agent is kind of standalone. And then the device appear into the Intune console because the rules are made into the Intune console.
I saw one company, they deployed as usual and have them enrolled into Intune, and then there was a scheduled task that ran much later that focused on Defender enrollment. How exactly they used that, I don't know, but they did it in that order. There might be other ways around. I just haven't played around with it. Anything that you have seen, Andrew?
No, not on that topic.
If I can find something, not this second, but I'll come back to you.
This what I saw is that the device is duplicated into the Intune console with two different IDs. And sometimes they're not merging together as one object.
Yeah, getting copies is quite common, but the idea is that they should resolve itself after a little bit. But I certainly have seen that not happening. But let me dig up some resources on that one, and I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
I still didn't understand the question. Is it enrolling device with the Defender for endpoint, or just provisioning the device with Defender? That just didn't make sense to me at all. How's that? What is that supposed to mean? The question by itself, I didn't understand.
As I understood, the question was basically what would be a good way to make sure devices are also enrolled in Defender for endpoint and not just Intune.
Yeah, that's definitely possible.
Unless I got the question wrong, that could have happened also.
Okay, that makes sense. I was thinking about provisioning a device through Defender, some kind. That's what it looks like when he was asking. But yeah, thank you.
Of course. All right. So obviously here I have a Windows device. If I open up the control panel on this one, this is just a regular workbook machine, no Active Directory, nothing. And if I just wanted to play around and see if my configuration is functional, I could very well go ahead and go to Access Work or School, wait patiently while that one loads, and then I can try to go and connect that into a tenant. And depending on patch level, it will either say Entra here. That means that your image that you deployed was at least somewhat recent. If it says Azure AD, you use the really old image and probably shouldn't. But the last year and a half, if your image has been patched, it will show Entra here. Now, this one here, never ever do, because that will be that personal device type registration that we mentioned earlier. And this one is tricky because if let me close this one. If your DNS is a little bit broken, I'm glad we are at the new month because October was like the month of no working DNS left and right. Amazon was out, Azure was out, or Microsoft was out. So I'm going to pretend to have a broken DNS. Now my DNS is badly broken. So now I'm going to try to do the same thing again. And please note the difference. If DNS is bad, and don't get me started on SSL inspection, but if DNS is bad, I don't like proxies either, by the way. Give this a moment to realize that it's broken. Here we are. What is missing? The Entra join is missing. I can only join it to a local Active Directory. So what do people do? Oh, okay, I must fill in this one. And if DNS is just flaky, it actually may work. So don't do that and make sure DNS works. And as you will learn when we do troubleshooting later, Intune and Entra, there are a million endpoints you need to be able to reach. And they cannot be either inspected or sometimes not even proxied. But as a start, you might have seen tool from Matthias Melkersen. That was an early tool for initially for autopilot, but autopilot also does enrollment. So basically, I check to make sure that, all right, the device can actually reach all of these endpoints that it needs to reach in order to do an enrollment. And this is just a starting kit. The real kit you need a Martin Hemkin for. But let me get this one link in the chat real quick. And again, we will come back to this one on Friday. So Martin Hemkin, he is also the author for the Winary customization tool. Here we go. Intune network requirements. So put that link in the chat also. This is a downright brilliant PowerShell script. And it's not just for Intune, it can check for more things. But if you open that script on GitHub, PowerShell script, it is a fairly long script, but it also has lists of resources that it's looking for. And as you can see in this list, it's more than one server, to put it mildly. It depends on what you do in the tenant. How many, basically what you're working on. But the community has been really good in providing solutions to basically make sure at least the device have a fighting chance of enrolling. There are going to be 4 billion other things that can go wrong as well. The time and date is going to be incorrect rather. The user is going to miss that license we talked about earlier, or it couldn't reach an endpoint. That's like the top 3 together with DNS, I guess, also in the mix. But yeah, fun stuff. All right. Anything like that there, Mr. Andrew?
No, very well said. Just answering
right.
some questions here in the Q&A. Good stuff coming up. So all good here.
All right, thank you.
We had, honestly, we had the same issue happened at the place I work. So what happened was we are in a hybrid environment, definitely. So devices were provisioned, but for some reason, they're not intra-joined or not registered in Entra. So it was escalated to identity and those operation, but they said the issue is with DNS. So I really didn't understand how they found out that, because if I'm exposed to the Intune console or the Entra, is there a place that I can check to find this out? How this can be traced?
Yeah, so we have a couple of sessions coming up on how to troubleshoot these scenarios.
Oh, definitely.
So if you can hold your horses until that, or then we'll go through that in great detail. And even tomorrow morning, Jürgen is going to give you a little bit of sneak preview on what can go wrong and some tools as well that you can leverage.
Thank you.
Of course. I'm not quite sure. There was a question in the chat regarding the front door. Not quite following. Andrew, you're smarter than me.
I don't know about that. I'm guessing that's just related to, there's a front door There's an Azure front door for basically all of the Microsoft Cloud endpoints. So Exchange front door, SharePoint front door, things like that.
All the different portals. Yeah.
Yep, all the different portals. And so I suspect that some of the URLs here in Martin's list, for example, are front door URLs. I don't know for certain, but I would expect that they are.
Yeah, I mean, and then a lot of them is also actually service endpoints that you need to reach. So it's not necessarily a portal, but something that machine needs to be able to reach, typically a web service or something. Andrew usually showcases, speaking of portals, this absolutely beautiful website that someone is maintaining. It holds a list to all the different portals that Microsoft has. And as you can see, there are just a couple. Throughout the training here, we're going to focus on like 4 of them. So
I've also gotten used to, depending on where I want to go, I may just browse really quick to cmd.ms and just search for a particular page, like an admin center or even applications in Intune, things like that.
Yeah, that one is good as well.
It's a fantastic search here, and there's a browser extension for this, which makes it even easier.
Right, let me get these links. But this is kind of what I referred to earlier. What makes Intune a great platform, it's not just Microsoft obviously developing it, but it's the community supporting it. Coming up with all of these very, very creative solutions, and sometimes they're not brilliant implementations and tips, and yeah, anywho. So we have a lab coming up. Those machines that you deployed shall be enrolled, and then they shall be managed. So let me get that document over to you. And this is also one of the labs that you have to complete, because everything else will be depending on using these VMs for the different type of configurations and app deployments and updates and things will do.